What a wonderful Lord's Day it's been so far. I sure appreciate everybody being here, and especially to our visitors today. You are our honored guests. You are so welcome among us, and we hope that you have felt that welcome during our time together so far. If you don't have a Bible, we got Bibles all throughout this auditorium in a little rack in the seat in front of you. You can take that home. It's yours. We would love it if you would take a Bible home with you, read it, study it, come up with questions. Please let us know if there's any way that we can serve you with a spiritual need that you have. So I want to get into our lesson this morning by putting something up on the screen, and I want to take a moment of silence and just let this sink in with you. I just want you to think about this, and then we'll get into the lesson when we've had that moment to ponder. So we've had a rough week, and I don't know if you pay attention to the news at all. I don't even think you have to watch the news to know that this has been a very difficult week. And I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is you could probably isolate news or big events from any week throughout all of human history, and you could probably say, well, that's been a bad week. And maybe what was a fine week for one country, if you look at the other side of the world and read their news, maybe for them it was a really bad week. So I don't want to make the mistake that I think a lot of preachers and commentators do by just taking things in isolation and kind of making this mistake of thinking that this was a worse day or a worse week or a worse time for our country than any other time. But there have been, admittedly, some very high-profile, prominent crimes that have been committed very recently. Things like a stabbing on a train in Charlotte that was, if you learned anything about it, it was disturbing. Certainly something that you kind of put yourself in the shoes of that person and wonder what you would have done. Would it have happened to you? Could you have prevented it? And I think for most of us, the answer is I don't think so. A very high-profile assassination. You know, and any time that you get a celebrity or a political figure or a commentator, anybody who has some massive amount of influence with people and that person is killed because of what he or she thinks and says, you kind of ask yourself, well, what if I speak very boldly about something that I think? Is there somebody out there who would hate me enough to kill me? And there was another school shooting also, and it has gotten to a point, and I, again, don't want to just be alarmist or anything for alarmist reasons, but it does feel like almost any week in America you could point at a news story and say, and there was another school shooting. You know, on top of all that, there's just the crime that happens all the time, right? We lived in Memphis, Tennessee for a while, and there's a lot of good things about a city like Memphis, or St. Louis, or Detroit, or Chicago, or New York. And there are a lot of very good people that live in cities like that. But for the people who live there, all you have to do is just enter into Google, Memphis News Today, and what is the very first thing that always comes up in cities like that? 2 dead. Another shooting at a gas station. And when you look at the news, if you're anything like me, after a week like that, you just feel beaten down. And you don't even know what you're supposed to feel anymore. You don't even know what you're supposed to do about it. Put thoughts and prayers out there on Facebook. Make some bold political statement. Fight back. Get vengeance. Ignore it, change the channel, keep scrolling until you get to something funny to watch to put you in a better mood. What should the response of a Christian be to a world of violence and murder? That's all we're going to talk about today. If you're anything like me, you try to disperse some of the tension with a joke. I want to promise you something. We're going to talk about violence and murder today in this lesson. But I hope, and it is my goal, and I've designed the lesson to accomplish this, hopefully, that by the end of this we see that there is light in our lives. And that light is from Jesus himself. You know, if you look back at the Bible and history, you realize it didn't take very long after the expulsion from the Garden of Eden for mankind to commit its first murder, right? You're reading in Genesis 2, they're in the Garden of Eden, everything looks fine in Genesis 2. Don't eat from that tree. Genesis 3, they ate from the tree. Come on, it was one chapter. So they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden by God. They have all these curses upon them. Life is hard. There's turmoil and trials and trauma and weeds and pain. And you get to chapter 4 and you're like, okay, well maybe we can adapt to this. Maybe we can be okay. And then halfway through chapter 4, the very first murder in human history happens. And it's not between strangers. It's not between natural-born enemies. It's between brothers. Abel offers a sacrifice that is acceptable and pleasing to God. Cain offers a sacrifice that falls short in some way. And in a jealous rage, brother murders brother, buries his body in the wilderness, and pretends like nothing happened. Now, sadly, as shocking as this must have been for the very small population of mankind in Genesis 4, I don't think there were very many people on earth back then, all it did was set the tone for the coming generations. And there's a few references in Genesis that show that it didn't take long for the descendants of Cain to be just as murderous and violent as him until you get to the point in Noah's lifetime when God looks upon the earth and sees nothing but violence and bloodshed and evil in man's heart continually, and God is so frustrated and disappointed that he brings a flood upon all the earth, save for one family. And while the Bible certainly is a witness to many positive experiences also, it's not like the only thing that's in the Bible is violence and bloodshed. There's also beautiful things. There's great victories. There's romance. There are good things in the Bible, but the Bible is a witness to a very brutal side to mankind and the human experience. You get prophets like Habakkuk who cry out to God in Habakkuk chapter 1 and say, how long do I have to look at violence and bloodshed all around me, God? All I see, I look out at the world and I read the news and all I see is violence and bloodshed. And it just tears me down. The world itself cries out, like Isaiah chapter 24 points out, that our sins and our violence and our bloodshed have brought a curse upon the ground itself. Murder, rape, abuse, tyranny, the whole book of Judges, Philistines, Amalekites, Assyrians, victims, skulls on pikes in people's front yards, martyrs for the faith, and even the crucifixion of Jesus. And you could go on and on and on. The Bible testifies to the violence of mankind. And so none of this is new. When someone gets assassinated or someone's killed in cold blood, murdered, when an unsuspecting person becomes a victim of a violent crime, when you personally are oppressed by somebody, if you have trauma in your own history, your own personal story, none of this is new. And until the new heavens and the new earth, it won't go away. So what is this lesson really all about? Maybe I'll give you a little glimpse into the mind of the preacher in his office during the week. I just thought really hard about what I was going to preach. Like some weeks, and anybody who preaches a lot Mark or Tim or anybody else will be able to tell you that some sermons come very easily, and you get to about Monday afternoon and you know exactly what you're going to preach about, and the information just comes to you. The PowerPoint slides come together, and you're like, great, done. Now it's just kind of tuning it up. This lesson wasn't done until Friday afternoon. Because I hemmed and hawed, and I thought about it, and I had 2 or 3 other lessons that I thought, well, maybe I could work on those. And it's been a bad week. Maybe we should just distract, divert. Let's just think about something else. What is this lesson really all about? Am I just a captive of the moment, caught up in a news cycle that's just particularly negative? What is this lesson really all about? It's about us confronting things. Now, I'll say this. I'm not preaching this lesson because I think any one of you is a murderer. I really don't believe that. At least I hope so. I certainly hope and pray, joking aside, that none of us is ever a victim of murder. And I don't know you well enough yet to know if your family maybe has had some kind of trauma related to violent crime in your past. But I do suspect that just statistically speaking, most of us in this room probably have not had a close relative who's been murdered. So again, I ask, if none of us is a murderer and we are not likely to be murdered, why am I doing a lesson about murder? Well, I think there's something about murder that just kind of like permeates a society, a community. There's something collectively traumatic about the whole thing. And to me, I think the analogy or the metaphor that I would use is murder in a community or a country or violence in a society is sort of like the very hot, muggy, humid midsummer day. You know, when there's no breeze and there's no wind and you go outside and the air just feels heavy upon you and it is inescapable. That is what I think violence does to a collective. We just all feel it, and it discourages us and it beats us down. But that leads to the next question. Okay. Why isolate just one sin versus any other? Because doesn't sexual immorality also impact a society? Doesn't rampant drug use also impact a society? What about the heart sins? Greed and covetousness, jealousy, anger, lust. Like, don't those also impact a society? Well, of course they do. And does God look upon those sins with the same disappointment? Well, absolutely. And I want to be clear about something. Sin is sin is sin. Are we clear about that? Sin is sin is sin. And when you read a verse like Revelation 21, verse 8, and the lake of fire and brimstone, who's there? The liar, the covetous, the adulterer, and yes, the murderer. But I want to ask and explore this a little bit. Is there something particularly egregious about murder? Is there something about murder that is in some way worse than other kinds of sins? Well, for obvious reasons. There are physical reasons, mental reasons, social reasons, legal reasons. Violent sins, and murder in particular, do have more severity attached to them. And while I think sin is sin, and the Bible attests that sin is sin, whether it is covetousness or murder, anger or whatever else it might be, sin and is condemning. The consequences for certain sins are more severe and more far-reaching. I mean, just look at our legal code. Even our own legal code acknowledges that there is a difference between first degree and second degree. There is a difference between a crime versus an aggravated crime. There is a difference between murdering 100 people and 1 people. Let's be real about that. There is a difference between murdering 100 people and murdering 1 person. Sin is sin, but there are certain consequences that are more severe when it comes to violent sins. And even God expresses this. Even God looks at violent sins with a particular revulsion as opposed to other sins. Look at the amount of times that the phrase, the shedding of innocent blood, is used in the scriptures. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 16 through 19. He says, there are 6 things that the Lord hates. Yes, there are 7 things that are an abomination to him. So the scriptures acknowledge that above other sins, there are certain sins that God hates more than other sins. Certain sins that are more of an abomination. And among those 7 sins that are particularly abominable to God is those who shed innocent blood. The fact that among the 10 commandments in Exodus chapter 20, that one of them is put so plainly, you shall not murder. It means that you shall not murder is a foundational concept. That all of the other laws related to human interaction are built upon at least this pillar of you shall not murder people. It's one of those foundational laws at Mount Sinai. But why? Why is it so revolting to God that people should kill each other? Shedding innocent blood and other violent or oppressive acts are so decried frequently in the Bible that time doesn't even allow for a brief mention of some of them. I put these up on the screen. Please write them down if you have the stomach for it to study further. Let me give you a couple of verses, though, that stand out to me on this subject. Go to Numbers chapter 35, verse 33. This is in the Old Testament, the book of Numbers. Go to chapter 35. Numbers chapter 35, verse 33. There's a phrase that really stands out here. So you shall not pollute the land in which you are, for blood pollutes the land, and no expiation can be made for the land for the blood that is shed on it, except by the blood of him who shed it. This is echoed in other passages. Like I said, Isaiah chapter 24 mentions this. In Psalm 106, verse 38, go to Psalm 106. Again, in the Old Testament, Psalm 106. It makes a statement here in Psalm 106 and verse 38. He says here, and they shed innocent blood, the blood of their sons and their daughters, whom they sacrificed to the idols of Canaan, and the land was polluted with the blood. There's something about that stands out to me, that yeah, you could say, don't kill people, but you're still kind of left going like, well, but why? The animals kill each other all the time. Why? What's so severe about it? And that these verses bring out this concept of don't shed innocent blood because by doing so, you pollute the land. Now, I don't know how far you want to take that in your own mind. I suppose I don't need to take it literally that God thinks the soil itself becomes polluted. But I think that there's a concept of when you murder, the shedding of innocent blood leaves a stain on the world around you. It is damaging. It gets into the very fibers of a community, of a family, of a society. Violent acts, perhaps more than any other sins, and I think that's why they're pointed out in this way, pollute the land. It pollutes a society. And why such a serious matter? Why is this so offensive to God? Why does he plead so earnestly with Cain? When Cain has murder in his heart, God goes to him first and says, I can see sin crouching at the door. You have to reject it. Why does he plead with Cain like that? And why is God so aghast at our propensity for violence? In Jeremiah chapter 19, when he talks about the violent acts that they did to their own children in sacrificing them to the gods of the Canaanites, Molech and the others, you know what God said about those kinds of violent acts? He says, you're doing things that I never commanded you to do. I didn't even conceive of them. It never even entered into my mind that you would do something like this. And I do think God looks at violent acts and the things that we do to each other, And that's where we get that in our spirit. I think we watch these things in the news and we just go, who would do that? Who would do that to another person? That comes from God. God looks at mankind and he goes, it didn't even enter my mind that you would do something like that. Burn your children on an altar to Molech? I didn't even think I had to command you not to do that. And that's what our violence does. It's shocking. It's shocking. And perhaps it's because life itself is imparted by God. This, I think, maybe more than anything else, is the reason why I think that violent acts are so offensive to God. Yes, it's sin when you take someone else's property. Obviously, that's sin. Yes, it's sin when you covet. Yes, it's sin when you lie. Yes, it's sin when you cheat on your taxes. Yes, it's sin. They're all sins. Sin is sin is sin. But when you murder someone, you are taking something away from that person that God gave to them. Their life, their breath. From the very beginning, when God looked at the world that he made everything else, the animals and the trees and the sea and the stars in the heaven. And then he took a handful of dirt from the ground and he formed it into Adam. And he breathed his spirit into him. He breathed his life into Adam. And when you kill someone, you're taking away God's life breath from them. That's a gift that God imparts that only God can take away from us. You kill an image bearer of the Lord. So what do we do? All right, we got to get to the practical part of the lesson. I know I've taken up a lot of your time this morning. But we can't end a lesson like that. That's too dire, right? Especially for somebody like me. I think you call someone like me a Pollyanna. I don't have the hair for that, though. When we do look at the news, when we look at all these bad stories, it just leaves us wondering, like, what are we supposed to do when all of this just beats us down like that? Well, let me give you 3 things, okay? 3 things. Because preachers always have to give you 3 things, and then probably a little bit more. Start with this. And please write the scriptures down. We don't have time to go through each of these things, but I put some scriptures up there as kind of a guide for you to think about these in your own time. But number one, when confronted with the horrors of this world, number one, you've got to remember what the stakes are. And I do think that that's a benefit to seeing violence in this world, is it really reminds us, like, what's at stake, okay? What is at stake is life versus death. What is at stake is heaven versus hell. Hell has been prepared for the devil and his angels, and at the end of all of these things, there will only be life eternal or death eternal. There will only be those on the right and those on the left. And do you want to join Satan in that realm of eternal death and decay? I do not. Jesus said in John chapter 8, your father the devil, and of course he's speaking to those who oppose his teaching, your father the devil has been a liar from the beginning. And what? What else does he say in John 8 verse 44? He is a murderer. That was always his goal, slithering in the trees, waiting for Eve to be all by herself. His goal was not to inspire Eve or to give her a gift or to teach her wisdom. It was always about her death. It was always about her murder. That is all he wants. Revelation chapter 12, there's this powerful image of a beast that wants to kill a baby being born. There's too much imagery there to get into. Needless to say, it is Satan. He wants to kill Jesus, and he wants to kill you too. And when Satan is defeated, when this beast is defeated in Revelation 12, you know what he does? He flails madly around the earth, trying to bring everybody else with him. He's trying to bring you down. He's trying to bring you down. Maybe he can't bring you down by killing you. He probably doesn't want to kill you yet, but he does want to bring you into despair. Because if you can have fear and despair, oops, I don't want to move on just yet, sorry. Because if you can have fear and despair and anger and vengeance in your heart, he doesn't need to kill you with the sword. He's already got the soul. Number two, when it comes to violence, we have a responsibility and an opportunity to nip it in the bud at its inception. Like I said before, statistically speaking, I don't think any of you are going to become a murderer. And you are unlikely to be murdered statistically. But do you have a bad temper with your kids? Do you say things to coworkers that you wish you could take back? Are you needlessly angry with people in the community, even complete strangers, people who have a soul who need to hear the gospel? Do you bring that anger into your marriage? Do you bring that anger into the church? Do you breathe threats and violence, though you never act upon them, but do you breathe threats and violence against other people? Well, then if you take the teaching of Jesus seriously at all in Matthew chapter 5, then it is a very, very short step from being angry with your brother to killing your brother. In James chapter 4, the great teacher there, James chapter 4, verse 1, what is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? You could ask that of America, or of a church, or of a family, or of a marriage. What are the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members? You lust and you do not have. So what do? So you commit murder. Well, I never committed murder. Don't throw that at me, Ryan. Well, again, what did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 5? If you are angry in your heart with your brother, you've already committed murder. Now, there might not be blood on your hands, I get that, but by being angry with your brother, you have hit the launch button on a missile. And that launch sequence, if left unchecked, will eventually lead to murder. And so he says, and you are envious, you cannot obtain, so you fight and you quarrel, you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and you do not receive because you ask with wrong motives so that you may spend it on your pleasures. And the Apostle John also in 1 John chapter 3 connects this love and hatred, your brother. He also connects it in verses 14 and 15. We know that we've passed out of death into life because we love the brethren. He who does not love abides in death. Everyone who hates his brother is what? Not a very nice guy, not a very good brother. No, he who hates his brother is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life in him. And so we have a responsibility to nip it in the bud, to stop murder before it ever becomes anything. And you stop it at the point of anger. Needless fighting, needless quarreling, to come together in unity, to forgive each other, to love one another. Because God has so loved you. Satan wants, and here's point number 3, Satan wants fear, despair, and hatred. Those all play into his hand. God offers faith, hope, and love. And I arranged it that way on purpose because those are all the antithesis of one another. Fear versus faith, despair versus hope, hatred versus love. Now abide these 3, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of them is love. 1 Thessalonians 1 and verse 3 also mentions faith, hope, and love together. John chapter 13, verse 35, the world will know who you are and that you're disciples of mine because of the way that you have love for one another. Love even your enemies in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 43. Love your enemies? Yes, love the people who want you to walk a mile, so walk two with them. Love the people who slap you on one cheek, so you turn to them the other. Love people who want to take one garment from you and you say, well, why don't you have the other one while you're at it? To love your enemies and to pray for them so that one day, perhaps, if their heart is pricked enough by your example, your enemies may become your brothers and sisters. Because remember, God loved us when we didn't deserve it either. Remember what Romans chapter 5 says? While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. We ungodly human rabble. And in John chapter 3, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have eternal life. Let me give some quick final thoughts here as we come to a close. You can't control the rest of the world, which means a lot of these tragedies are unavoidable. Just is what it is. You live in Genesis 3 now. It is what it is. But you can control a few things. You can help people who are right around you, your neighbors, your family, your coworkers. You can be there for your kids in their worst and their darkest moments. You can love your neighbor as yourself. You know what else you can control? You can control the media that you consume. I'm not saying bury your head in the sand, but you can also try to see that there's a lot of good news out there too. Good things happening, heroes, people doing the right thing, loving each other. That also happens. Satan doesn't want you to know about it, but it does happen also. I don't want to be dismissive of any of these events that have happened, but often our perception is warped by too much exposure. And so we need to avoid overstatements and exaggerations. You can support those who have been victimized as you have the opportunity to do so. And even when the crime is not public or it's not covered by the media, you can be supportive of the people in your life who have been victims of violent acts in the past. Defend those in need. Stand up for the weak. Guide them to resources. And don't be shocked by anything that somebody tells you. Instead, be deeply compassionate. So we end with the scripture reading that was right before our lesson from Psalm 23. Can we have the same assurance in God that David did when he penned those words that have comforted so many millions for so many centuries? That even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, which could be a train in Charlotte or a college campus in Utah or a school in Colorado or the street in front of your house, I fear no evil because you, my God, are with me. If you're not a Christian here today, you are missing out. God is just waiting to shepherd you through this life, through the darkness, to green pastures and still waters. He is waiting to prepare a table for you in the midst of your enemies. He is waiting for you to finally accept him as your shepherd. So if you have any spiritual need at all that we can help you with today, please let that need be known by coming forward as we stand and sing together.